Good morning on this Monday. We will be in Daniel chapter 3 right after this. Well, we are back again, and we are in Daniel chapter 3 this week. We will not be on the screen. We're going to read the first 6 verses. Probably one of the stories that it doesn't really include Daniel, but it's in the book of Daniel. It includes his 3 friends. We're going to be talking on that for the next few weeks. But probably one of the stories of Nebuchadnezzar that we, especially if we've grown up in church, that we are familiar with. Maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks when we've been looking at chapters 1 and 2, we saw a different side of Nebuchadnezzar. We saw him as somebody that was kind of bribing people, doting on them a little bit to make sure he got something in return. In chapter 2, he gets a little bit arrogant in the sense that he's going to make his magicians and astrologers tell him the dream, and if they don't, he's going to kill them. But we're going to look now at chapter 3, beginning verses 1 through 6 today. And I'm just going to kind of center our lesson around him and his attitude, because there can be, unfortunately, a little bit of Nebuchadnezzar in us at times, if we look at it in the direction I want you to see it today. So picking up chapter 3, verse 1, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. That would be 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. And he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, the governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled. It'd be nice if they would have just said the cabinet members, okay? But that's not what they do. And all the other officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, the harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down. Worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." I don't know of anyone personally who is building such a tower, such an image to worship, or commanding communities to do so. But there is something within this story that connects to our lives. But before I get to that, let me share with you some of the strengths. Sometimes we have a tendency to focus on negative things a lot of times, even in our own personal world. And so there are some strengths that Nebuchadnezzar had. He was the greatest of the Babylonian kings. He was known as a builder of cities. And he is described in the Bible as one of the foreign rulers that God used for his purposes. But Nebi had some weaknesses. I like to call him Nebi on the side. He was one of those world leaders who decided that he could get more cooperation from the people that he conquered by letting them keep their gods. Their lands, he took. Their riches, he robbed. Their lives, he controlled. But their idols, he allowed them to worship. This leads to one of Nebuchadnezzar's biggest weaknesses, himself. He thought of himself as a god, and he was persuaded to build an image of gold that everyone, no exceptions, everyone was to worship. Now, we might not face idolatry quite like the people of the Old Testament times did, but we face our own temples of false values, materialism, a life of leisure, sensuality, security. And here's the biggest one in today's world: worship of self. You know, the second commandment in the list of 10 that Moses received from God deals with idols. And this might be something that most of us cannot relate to unless we include life goals. Now, don't get me wrong, having a life goal is not wrong, unless those life goals revolve around something or someone other than God. Nebuchadnezzar has been already introduced somewhat by Daniel to the power of God. And yet Nebuchadnezzar cannot get away from the idea that he himself is a god, and he is so wrapped up in himself that he has this image built, and he demands that people start worshiping it. And if not, there will be consequences. Well, if you grew up in church, you know how this story plays out. But I hope that you will join us each of the next few weeks, because we're going to travel through chapter 3 just like we've done some of the others and take our time to look at this. Not only Nebuchadnezzar, but 3 of Daniel's friends who took a stand to do what was right. Even, and I'm kind of giving you a teaser here, even if their God, the creator of the universe, wasn't going to save them. We'll talk more about chapter 3 and Nebuchadnezzar and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in our coming weeks. Thank you again for joining us this week, and we hope that you have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Monday on Plugged In.